Alvin. I'm the host and the founder of the Jazz Confusion
My
Power
name
Hour.
is Dion Parson, and I'm honored to share my passion of music with you, our listening audience, through my cultural heritage.
Things can change for you too. If you want to be brand new, that is absolutely possible.
Good morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Jazz Confusion Power Hour. I'm Mel Alvin. I'm your host tonight. I'm the founder of the Power Hour. The Power Hour has featured some of the best in jazz, R&B, and soul artists and their music. We've had over 150 artists so far on our show. You get to hear not only their stories, but also how the artist goes about creating the music that we all love. We take you backstage into the mind and daily life of the artist. And this is how you get to understand more about the music production process and how dedicated these artists are to create the music that we hear every day. The Power Hour broadcasts weekly on the Source TV radio network, live and streaming 4K and daily and Dolby True HD. Source is a nonprofit 501c3 radio station supporting jazz, adult music, and Black and minority micro businesses to build scale so that these businesses can get on the finance industry radar, ultimately create and increase the generational transfer of wealth, assisting both family and community for equality and equity. We depend on listener contributions and artists who appear in our shows for mutual support and also sponsors to cover our costs of broadcasting. So any donation that you make to Source is really greatly appreciated, and it helps keep jazz alive and well 24/7. Remember, all your donations are always tax-free. I mentioned to you already the Power Hour has had over 150 amazing artists, well-known and becoming well-known. These are musicians and also vocalists. Some of the artists on the Power Hour have included Eric Roberson, Mesa, Brian Culbertson, Paul Brown, Raheem Devon, Reagan Whiteside, Alex Harris, Greg Adams, Tom Brown, Costella, Eric Darius, Pieces of a Dream, Kamasi Washington, Kiko Matsui, Kim Scott, Sheryl Crow, Billy Ocean, Annie Lennox, Dwelle, Marie Antoinette, Jay Brown, Miss Monet, Yulia, Walter Williams Sr., Blake Aaron, Edwin Tony Nicholas, Terry Wollman, Her, Shalene Johnson, Erin Stevenson, Mavis Swan Poole, Samara Joy, Cecily, the late Bobby Caldwell, Jeff Bradshaw, Dion Parsons, Jeff Beck, Eric Burden, and many more. So I wanted to just run through a partial list of the artists who have been on our station. And tonight we have a special guest, an artist who has appeared here on our show as an artist, but also is a very well-established booking agent. And tonight we're going to be discussing the changes in the music industry and how a musician, a vocalist, a band can create a successful career and generate revenue from multiple streams so that they can pursue this career as a life ambition, not just a part-time endeavor. The music industry today looks nothing like it did a quarter century ago. Prior to streaming, the record industry and FM radio dominated. Record labels provided artists with money in advance, recording sessions, A&R, that's artists and repertoire. Artists and repertoire was really important. They actually would take the artists and build them from the bottom up. They tell them how to dress. They would help define the musical style and the songs that will be included as single releases and as LPs. They would train them how to do radio interviews. They did everything to build the image of an artist or band. That was A&R and very important. So today, before there was structure, and that's what I'm trying to explain, there was a structure for how artists were developed and brought along. Today, in place of that, I see chaos. From 1960 to 1990, I'm sure that everyone can name iconic bands or artists very easily. You can start with Elvis Presley. You can go from there to the Beatles. You can go to Pink Floyd. You can go to great jazz musicians and jazz artists like Herbie Hancock. There were always iconic musicians and bands that we could name. Name one since 1995. How many can you think of that are iconic, like the Rolling Stones, or looking at, if you look at the blues, B.B. King, how many can you point to today that have that iconic stature? If you can point to one or two, it'll be a lot. And this is why the music landscape is changing. Artists are on their own now. In order to succeed, they have to be able to build a team. And to build a team costs money. It's not uncommon today that to become a reasonably well-known artist, you really need to spend 50 to 70,000 a year to build and maintain your brand and a career. Music artists can make money from live performances, streaming royalties, merchandise sales, licensing opportunities, building a strong online presence, engaging with fans, and delivering, revenue streams that are the key to the success. Tonight, I have on my show a musician, a very fine jazz guitarist. His name is Ellis White. Ellis has performed for several decades with himself as a frontman and a sideman. And he also has written music and produced music. And he's evolved now into a booking agent, an independent booking agent. So tonight, I have the privilege of having Ellis on my show so we can begin to discuss how does a musician, and an artist, a band, how do they make money for a successful career in today's music industry? So let me bring on Ellis. Pardon my voice. Ellis, welcome.
Hey, Mel. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show, Ellis. Ellis, I'll let everybody know we've been friends for quite some time, as well as we work together on different projects, and I started to mention to everybody about your career and how it has now developed into like a third act where now you've created a booking agency and you have some very well-known talent that you're working with. So why don't you tell people a little bit about your musical background and about how you got into the idea of becoming a booking agent?
Okay, sure. So I've been in the music scene since probably the mid 80s. I started out like a lot of people do in the cover band, local cover band scenario, and doing the rock scene. And I morphed into blues. Spent many years doing that, and then took a shine to the contemporary jazz scene, and become more involved in that, and started a group around 2010. It was called Catch the Groove, and then kind of after COVID and what happened with COVID, things kind of fell apart. People kind of went their own ways, and I started a solo career at that point, and putting out music by myself as opposed to with the band. A couple of years ago, I had a couple of musician friends of mine ask me if I could help them, perhaps find some additional performances. So I started doing that just as kind of a favor. And I kind of liked how it was going, and I started to get my more experience. I hooked up with an existing agency, spent some time with them to kind of get my feet wet and better understand the process, and then got licensed independently, and started talking to people, and started off with a couple of people that were interested, and now it's morphed into what it is today, which is a multiple strong talent roster under my company called So Vibe Entertainment. So that's kind of how I've progressed from musician to, where I focus most of my time now.
Wonderful. That's terrific. Well, what's the difference between a talent buyer and a booking agent? Why don't you explain to our listeners?
Okay. Well, so the talent buyer is working for a venue or a festival. They are searching or searching and making decisions for that venue as to who will be hired to perform there. Whereas I represent the artist as opposed to the venue and work to match an artist to various venues depending upon what their likes and dislikes are, as by what type of venues they want to perform in. So for example, if I have an artist that wants to just play in intimate venues and small theaters, I wouldn't try to match them to a theater that needs to seat 1,000 people. So it's a walking the line of matching the right people to the right place, and negotiating a price that works for all involved.
Yeah, I'm just curious about a few things, Ellis. Since you've been in the music industry for so long, how do you see the market for live music today compared to how it was 25 or 30 years ago? Have you seen it change, or is it the same?
Yeah, there's been a big change since, especially since COVID. Because now there are less places, less venues than there used to be. So many have closed down, and many didn't reopen after COVID. And in today's economy, others are starting to, to close up too, or they're having to raise their prices, their ticket prices, which becomes a challenge. So a lot of the venues that are still operating are operating facing some challenges that they are trying to overcome.
Um, I'm just curious about what you just said. Um, so do you think it's become more difficult for musicians to be able to get live gigs than it was before?
Well, yeah, there's two reasons for that. One is like I said, it's there just aren't the plethora of venues that there once was, and secondly, the field of artists is very crowded right now, and there's a saturation. Um, so between the competition and the saturation, for the venues that still do exist, especially in the jazz world, it becomes tough, and there's a lot of things that an artist can do to try to combat that, and because I hear constantly, about especially festivals and larger venues, it's the same people all the time being hired to perform there. Um, and how do you break through that barrier?
Well, I'm asking you.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways, things that people can do. One is, they need to um, produce really good videos. Video is king, especially right now, and it's important to, with your EPK, to have your, video really near the front of it. Because the talent buyer is going to look at what do they sound like, how do they perform, what do they look like. Um, So those three things, kind of need to be in the forefront of whatever you're presenting in front of them to look at to make a decision if they're going to hire you to perform or not. I'm just trying to look at my notes here. Having a strong presence online, that makes, really building your brand, keeping yourself in the forefront. Um, let's see.
Let me
Go
let me
ahead.
let me suggest something here. Maybe there's a step that we should have taken first. Given the fact that there are no more record labels to
Mhm.
promote you for airtime, to help, get you into a recording studio for free, to be able to produce quality music, this is now on the artist's shoulders. And I think the first step, and you mentioned some of the tools they need, obviously, an online presence, perhaps a website, an EPK, video, but they need a team. They need somebody
Mhm.
who's going to help. An artist can't do all the booking, do the production, play the instruments, or do the vocals, do post production. It's just not possible, unless you're Brian Culbertson, who seems to have figured out how to do all of this. But for most artists, you need to build a team,
Exactly.
and the problem is, how do you pay that team, and when do you pay them? And this has become a big challenge for any artist. So many artists today, this, they have daytime jobs and they do music on the side because
Hmm.
they need a way to finance it. This never used to be the case before. Before, you did one demo, you sent it to all the record companies, you know, and it's not like that. So you need to have somebody who's managing the whole band or managing the operation, somebody who's going to be helping to book, to get you booked, somebody who's going to be able to get you studio time, and you need an engineer or producer to make sure that the music quality is very, very high. You need a
Hmm.
videographer to do some videos to put online at YouTube. You need to build your fan base. You need to just have your music distributed in digital format, or if not digital format, stream, and be able to show that your music is out there. And then you have to be able to show, like you said, video venues you performed at. So it's to do all these pieces and be an artist at the same time is just not doable unless you understand the logistics of building a team and you have good people to work with you, so you can call in quality artists for recording sessions, have them on your recording label, rather than use beats or use something that's artificial that any good talent buyer would pick up on right away.
Hmm.
So the building the team side is really critical. Now, the artists that come to you, I don't want you to be specific, but in general, have they gone through this process of team building in most cases, or some of them just aren't adept at it? What do you find?
Yeah, I mean, some have, and some, have, built very good teams around them. Um, Others are working on it, and some need some additional guidance on how to do that. And I think a lot of those that really haven't been able to create that team around them is pretty much due to economics,
Yeah, yeah.
because it all costs money. Between radio promoter and the cost for the studio and the musicians that you have to pay in the recording studio, advertising, um, and marketing. Um, and you mentioned some of the ways in your intro, some of the things that they can do outside of writing, recording, and performing, because as we all know, streaming, um, you have to get significant number of streams in order to really see any real income coming from that. Um, So you have to subsidize that with something.
Yeah,
Like you said, merchandise, and perhaps other things that other possibilities are holding clinics,
mhm.
teaching either online or in person, depending upon time. Um, that's just a few of the things that you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, Ellis, if you mentioned Spotify. On average, Spotify pays artists between 0.003 cents to 0.005 cents, depending on your history, per
Hmm.
stream. So if you have 1 million streams, you just made $3,000. That's it. I mean, and 1 million streams, it's a lot. So when you look at the economics and people, and there's so many people streaming today, the competition, the noise out there is hard to break through. But even if you have 1 million streams, you only made 3,000. At 2 million, made 6,000. And how many people ever have 2 million streams? And the level of income from that is insanely low. And that's why I said the music industry is chaotic, because there is no structure to it, and there is no logic to how you make money if you're an artist. And for most people that become artists, you'll agree, it's a passion. It's a talent and a passion. And if they don't have that passion, they're not going to be around long, because it's very hard today. And so many of the venues that used to be even local venues now have DJs, because a DJ is a lot cheaper than paying live musicians.
Hmm.
So the competition around the musician is so intense. It's really difficult, and that's why an independent booking agent like you is an absolute necessity, because most of your money is not going to come from streaming. It's not going to come from merchandise. It's not going to come from digital downloads. Although digital downloads could be a lot more cost effective, because you can get a CD, you
Hmm.
know, but or vinyl. But by and large, um, the artist needs, I think, in my mind, you tell me if I'm wrong. First, they do need to have a booking agent like yourself, and I'm not trying to sell you. I'm just trying to sell the concept, and that's why you're here. You're really good at it, and that's why I'm having you on the show for sure. But they need to have a booking agent who's independent, because you can't just wait for one booking agent to get you all the gigs. It just won't
Hmm.
happen that way. And the second thing, I think that's, whoop, I just lost my headphone. 1 second. And these are advertised that they won't fall out of your ear.
So much for that.
Yeah. But so one thing is you need a booking agent. The other thing is you need some recordings that are studio level, high quality commercial recordings. And then I think you need to have airtime. And you need to go sometimes to people that specialize in getting you on the air. And the reason is then you can get on Billboard and you can have several top 10 hits or a number 1 hit. So I guess my next question to you, how important is that part for your job to get somebody booked? Do you think if you have somebody who has had 1 or 2 number 1 hits on Billboard or top 10 hits, do you think that helps you book them?
I think it helps, but I don't think it is integral. It's not the be all end all goal to get booked at a venue. Um, it's having the right music. It's having strong stage performance. Um, and it's, and a lot of it has to do with, being successful in building your fan base. Um, because they're going to look at, as you well know, um, outside of festivals, any other type of venue is they're looking at it from an economic standpoint. Or how many people can that artist potentially sell tickets to? Um, So, if they don't have much of an online presence, or they don't have a really strong fan base, they might be overlooked in many times, by that particular talent buyer.
Okay, let me just try to play this a different way. Maybe the answer is still the same. If you're looking at a major festival like Heritage or Seabreeze or, Capital Jazz Fest or Newport, do you think it does add credibility if you're a national recording artist and you've had several recordings out there that have charted? Do you think on those cases that being a recognized recording artist has more impact, or is it still the same?
No, I think that it has more impact.
Okay.
Because you're now in a, I guess a status of recognition, being at that national or international recording artist level. So I absolutely think that has lots of merit.
Okay. Okay. I want to keep working on the different aspects of becoming a successful musician. So the next thing I wanted to ask you about is, um, i- if you want to get booked and you want to build a fan base so that you have something to show through a booking agent like yourself to a venue, the pieces that you mentioned social media, that people need to have a social media presence. I don't know if artists really know what that means. That doesn't mean slapping up, a video here and there. It means working to build your fan base on your social media platform, which is quite different. Just throwing things up there isn't going to get it done. And so that takes a level of expertise and somebody to manage your social media for you.
Mhm.
You need a really good social media manager or a group that will represent you and manage you on social media. The next thing is, and I've been a big advocate of this, and I see it, some artists don't have it. I'm a big advocate of having your own website because, correct me if I'm wrong, if you look at any of the venues that are well established, if when they look at your EPK, they're going to look at your website. They're not going to go to look at your social media first. I think they're going to look at your website, and that's where they're going to get all the detailed information they want. Then they may go look at your social media to see how many likes you have, But by and large, and that leads me to the next aspect of this: how do you build a fan base? And today is it's so easy to develop a pay-for interactive fan base model where you have more direct communications through virtual media, with your fan base. These are all essential parts of creating not only different streams of wealth. You want to make money while you're sleeping. So
Mhm.
if you have 1,000, this has always been my thing, and you can tell me what you think. If you have 1,000 fans, only 1,000 who are willing to pay $10 a month, you just made $120,000 a year while you're sleeping. If they're
Mhm.
willing to become, and $10 a month in this economy is not a lot of money, but how many artists really work to cultivate, to bring that fan base and have different levels like $5, $10, $2, and offer them something unique? Most artists, I don't think, are anywhere near that level of building that fan base. That's something you can take to the bank and also show to booking agents like yourself and to venues. Look, this is a solid fan base this person has. People will show up. So I know. What do you think about all that?
Yeah. So here's some things that you know. Have you ever heard the term super fan?
Hmm.
If you really want to, engage your fans, so that they, are really true followers and become, super fans, um, there's a certain level of, vulnerability, that you have to show. They are going to want to know more about you as person, as they do as a musician. Um, So it's important to, have videos on there where you're talking to your fans and, um, just, kind of interacting. If you're not interacting one on one, you're interacting by having yourself on there talking about, something that they could relate to, so that they like again, so they can get to know who you are, and you need to be able to evolve and adapt as times change and people change. Um, and stay relevant. But the biggest thing I think is your fans are looking for you to stay true to who you are. Um,
Mhm,
that's why they're a fan.
mhm.
Um, and if you start wavering to try to be somebody else, they'll recognize that. Um, so those are some key things I think that are really important, to gain fans and keep them.
It's interesting because an early example of that was Bob Dylan when he went to Newport playing an electric guitar, and they
Yeah.
booed him. They booed him off the stage because that wasn't who they were expecting.
No, they
So
didn't want that at all.
no, so the idea, and we know Dylan's story, it seems to have worked out for the man,
Mhm,
but for most people, if you do that, you could lose your fans in a drop of a hat. So,
mhm.
being true to yourself is really important. But I think what I'm referring to is monetizing your fan base
Yeah,
by asking them to join at different levels and having some live interaction. I mean, like on my show, I can have 10 guests. So you can do meetings with 10 fans for 15 minutes and they'd be thrilled, and you can tell them, I'll also give you any music that comes out, you'll be the first to get it for free. So, you're giving them something and give each fan a t-shirt if they sign up for the $10 a month for a year, and, start to make the relationship with your fans personal.
exactly. That's the big
Yeah,
key.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you start to have, like I said, then you make money while you're sleeping. And that's what a lot of artists need. They need this passive income, because if they're looking, if you're looking for streams, like I said, you do a million streams and made $3,000 for the whole, it, and that's where a lot of artists put their effort into
Mhm.
getting airtime and having streams. And it's non-productive in terms of making money. So it may make your ego feel good, but as a career, unless you're independently wealthy, it's not going to work for you. That's not the way the music industry works today.
No, not at all.
So, yeah, so I think these are the important things that any artist who's starting out needs to do. The other thing is, and this is something I've heard many, many well-recognized artists talk about. They actually went to through a music program, whether it's Rutgers for jazz or no matter what the program might be, whether it's the New York City for any of the the dramatic arts um, programs, that they through that process they not only learn to explore musical genres and become a better artist, but they make connections that are irreplaceable. They'll make connections with other artists who go out and will then use them in their gigs, and they start to form networks. And I think for young artists, I going for a music degree is not for the degree. It's what the institution could represent in terms of your ability to become a functional artist and be able to start to spread your wings and become a more integral part of the music community.
Mhm.
Building these relationships is what happens at music colleges and music schools. So, how do you feel about that? Do you think that's a path for a young musician to take?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it comes under a category I call strategic networking. Um,
Yep.
you know, and it's being active and then focusing on um, you know building those types of relationships with the types of people that are going to be able to help you in and achieve the goals that you have, um, as a as an artist and even maybe personally.
Yeah, I think an artist that is local in the Virginia, Washington, Baltimore area. His name is Christian D. Masonis. He's a bass player, and
Hmm.
he's called Big New York. And through connections, there was a disc jockey in the UK he was introduced to, and in the conversation, Christian was about to produce some new music in the studio. The disc jockey asked him if you could have anybody record on that song with you, who would you want? And Christian said Bob James. And the artist said, the DJ said, "Oh, I know Bob personally." And he sent Christian's music to Bob James, who then recorded it and appeared on the song with him. And these things seem to be one-off accidents, but they're not. It's the
No,
network that you build that creates these opportunities. You know,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. So, there's so much today that an artist needs to do in order to be successful. What things do you have? I know there are things you wanted to talk about. Is there anything we've missed so far that you want to talk about?
No, I mean, like you said, I mean, it's the days of you know, having signing to a label today doesn't mean what it used to mean, and you don't have the same type of benefits where you were kind of taken in and taken care of and guided, like you said, throughout your whole career. Now it's like you're doing your own self-guided tour of how do I get through this and become successful. Um, and any really good, successful business person will tell you that they got to where they are by building a great team around them.
Yeah.
So, um, and that's all important. I'd kind of recapping a little bit of what we've talked about, and then you know figuring out ways outside of the norm to try to create additional income influx to pay for that team. Um, but the only other thing I just wanted to touch on a little bit was I'd mentioned previously about venue struggles.
Hmm.
Um, with economy right now, even though that there seems to be on the surface a um, strong performance. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Diet, I guess, for the lack of a better word. It's a lot of the venues are having to take a hard look at what they can pay and how much they can increase their prices to still get people in the door. So those, and there are some really nice venues out there that don't have as deep pockets as some people might think they have. And I've had conversations with a half a dozen of them as of recent, and they're looking to try to find some artists that are willing to negotiate with them a little bit and work with them through the leaner time that they're having right now. And to so just a heads up to artists to kind of keep that in mind, to be they might need to be a little flexible to try to get into a venue that they might really want to play at, but they might not have had the wherewithal to pay them what they could have maybe paid them a couple of years ago. Um,
A lot of venues that I know, still know, and I don't know if you find this. A lot of venues will give an artist a guarantee and part of the door, so that that way the the venue is not completely at risk, and the artist has some minimum guarantee, So they're not completely at risk either. Is that still something that you see out there?
I still see it, but it's there are some places that's still a lucrative scenario, and others that they're kind of cutting back on how much of a guarantee they want to offer. Um, they're trying to lessen their risk as a venue owner to the best extent they can, but at the same time trying to keep the artist in mind and not have them play for peanuts,
Sure.
but just just have an open mind and to try to come to an agreement that works for both the artist and the venue. It's not all cases, but there are a handful of them um, that a lot of the artists that are on my roster are asking to perform at, that have had these conversations with. So I just bringing that up. It's just important um, to kind of have that mindset in mind.
If something else,
Especially if you're not a Culbertson or Boney James or somebody of that caliber who can say what they this is what I want and they'll get it.
yeah, 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 absolutely. One of the things that a booking agent like you can do, because you have a nice list of artists, you can start doing pairings
Mhm.
and offer packages to a venue. And why don't you talk about that a little bit and how that works?
Okay, so and that's what I've been doing as of recent. I've been looking at trying to put some various pairings and packages together. People that complement each other, um, and but aren't the same. It's like I know there's a lot of things out there have like three sax players performing together or something. Trying to be a little more diversified than that. But um, venues like to see something coming in as a package where there's more than one artist that are going to perform in their venue. It helps generate extra ticket sales, interest, and and I think most artists are excited to participate in something like that. At least from my dealings so far.
Yeah, I think that opens the door for a lot of artists, and you can do it thematically too. And you and I have talked about this, Ellis.
Hmm.
Like for example, you are blessed to have a number of excellent female jazz artists who are not just vocalists but also instrumentalists in many cases.
Hmm.
And we've talked about, or you've told me about how you're planning to put together some female jazz artists to give a venue a whole female jazz performance for an evening, which makes it more orchestral and opens the door to a lot of orchestras that in the summertime, for example, are fairly dormant, and they have open days, and this is a way of packaging artists to venues that they would not normally have access to or consider, but it could be a door opener and a benefit for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Um, just to expound on that, as we've talked about, there not being the same level of venues there were 5 years ago. Um, and some of the struggles that some of them are having, etc. The level of competition for what shows are out there, etc. Um, I have found that it's important to actually um, would have a mindset that okay, if you don't have a venue, you think or show, create something. Um, and so those are different things that I'm trying to work on now to and that's part of where these packages and these pairings come in, to try to create some collaborations with venues, and theaters, etc. To do something that's a little outside the box, a little outside the norm, to get artists, out there and performing it on stage.
Right. And my thought is when you and I have been talking about this, you know, before, in other conversations we've had, a lot of artists would never have access to a symphony orchestra hall. But as an individual, but collectively, I mean, you could even put on a series. There are so many symphony orchestras who that concert hall is empty because are on summer schedule. They want to fill it. So they're more
Mm-hmm.
than willing. They're more than willing to pay, to have artists or a series of, let's say, a series put on by female jazz performers. There are things that a booking agent can do that an individual artist has no access to on their own. And again, we're talking today about multiple streams of income, and this is another stream of doing collaborations.
Exactly.
And
Mhm.
so I think you have to be flexible today, and you have to be fast in the sense that you're ready to change direction from what you considered to be the way in which your music career is going to go, and become more flexible in order to make your career successful. It's, it,
Mhm.
it's it's hard to do it the old way anymore, and there are still a lot of managers out there that insist on the old way, and their artists their bookings keep going down in terms of revenue per booking because it doesn't work that way the way it used to anymore. A lot of artists used to command 25, 35,000 per performance. They've been out there for 20, 30 years, and they're considered in some cases to be on the downside of their career, and they can't command that kind of money anymore. And the management is critical to making sure that the artists at every stage of their career are engaged with the changing nature of the industry,
Mhm.
so that they're not left behind, and in fact they can keep growing revenue rather than see revenue shrinking. So I think there's a lot that artists can learn from what we're discussing tonight, especially new artists. One of the people who have a show on my station, the famous jazz drummer Dion Parson.
Mhm.
Um, Dion sent his son to Interlochen, which is one of the finest music academies in the country. And the reason is it's not just the music education, it's who he's going to meet. And through Dion, Dion's son has had lessons from the Marsalis brothers. They've given him lessons on horn. He's had drumming lessons from some legendary drummers in the jazz industry. And so there are different ways. What I'm pointing out here is the generational transmission of how you become an artist. And if you may have parents, who are connected to the entertainment and music industry. There are multiple ways that doors open, but it doesn't open the same way for everybody,
Right.
sure. So, but you have to take advantage of the opportunities if you want to be a successful artist. So, that's the difficult part. So what last minute things, or what things can you tell everybody, or tell any artists out there about what they need to do to increase their revenue? In other words, a lot of the strategies we talked about aren't useful for every artist. How does an artist decide, from your perspective, which ways they should be looking to build their career?
I think I think one of the things is that it's like, I guess, looking deep inside and determine where. Um, I think we all have a unique identifier. What makes us a little bit more unique than the other artists that I have to compete against, and embrace that and um, and market that. Setting yourself apart in some way, to achieve that success. And but as far as you know, income streams. I mean, it's like all these things that we've talked about. Once if they're implemented, should help with you know a lot of these types of things. But it's finding the time to expand the different aspects. So if you're not performing, you're not recording, um, and can you fit a clinic in someplace? Can you uh, do an online class, master class? Um, can you offer to do arranging or something for another artist?
Or be a
And
music director for another artist.
yeah, it's something,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways to kind of capitalize on your skills and your abilities outside of just the mainstream going up on stage and performing and putting music out on the radio. It's exploring where your strengths are and where you can offer your strengths too, um, and monetize that.
Yeah, one of the things that just came to mind is, bands or artists should look very heavily at becoming residents, either, the house band or resident band at different venues that are local. And there's a reason for it, separate from building your fan base. There's a book that was written by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talked about the 10,000 hours. He's the first one to identify that, and he talked about the Beatles and when they were in Hamburg, Germany, and they performed on stage 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. So when the Beatles launched their first record, it was no accident that they were that good in a way. They had worked with each other day in, day out, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, part of becoming a successful artist, if you have a band, is getting that band to know exactly what each band member is going to do, so that so that the whole becomes greater than its parts. And I think that's something that so many bands miss, because they don't look for, where can I become a house band or residency? Who'll
Mhm.
take me in? And I think that today that could be a very important first step. It may not be financially lucrative, but you're going to hone your skills. And when you come to the recording studio, or you get a venue out of town, a gig, your band's going to shine, because you're going to have worked closely together for a long time. And I don't know if bands, today, are willing to pay the dues that way in order to develop, a much more commercial and much more refined sound. What do you think about that?
No, I don't think they do. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of commitment,
Mhm.
um, and a lot of hard work and hours to make it. And I don't even mean making it big, so to speak. I mean just being able to get out there and get hired for performances. And I think that that's probably, like you said, that's a good way to gain both exposure, but more musician camaraderie, and some income by kind of finding a residency somewhere, to have a specific certain targeted situation with some type of income you can rely on.
Yeah, but see, to me, it's separate from the income. You're honing your craft.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
putting in the hours, so you have a unique sound. You can work on your sound. So when they present an EPK through a booking agent like you to a talent buyer at a venue, it sounds like something. It sounds good. It sounds in some ways unique or original, and it has all the professional elements in it you expect from a top quality group of artists. So it's even if it's not that profitable, if you don't make that commitment as an artist and you don't put in the hours, you're going to have it's hard to generate a career because again, this was what record labels did, and they paid radio stations to play your music. It's called payola, and it was considered to be illegal, but they did it all the time. You
Mm-hmm.
know, but now having a residency at a local venue is the way in which you start to take on some of the functions of what the label would do to help professionalize and develop your music. So, I think there's so much out there that we're talking about that artists need to consider today. And the magnitude of the task is vexing. It's large. It's not easy, and it's not for the faint of heart. You have to love the music and be committed to it. The artists that you manage have made that commitment, and they have results to show for it.
Yes, they do. Absolutely.
Well, look, Ellis, this has been great talking with you about this. It's something I wanted to have on this station for a while, because for a lot of the artists that listen in every week, I think there's a lot they can learn, and there's a lot more they need to do. Some artists say, "Well, I don't want to be bothered interacting with my fan base. I just want to play my music." Well, you'll be playing your music alone. I'm not sure that's your intended outcome. And
Exactly.
so you have to start in this day and age changing gears and recognizing talent is not enough. That you need to you need to create the structure that is no longer out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart by any means.
No, it
It's a
isn't.
it's a challenging course, but it can be rewarding. People do break through, and they do have solid careers. So and and that last thing something we didn't mention is try to be innovative. When COVID came around, some artists that you and I know, like Brian Culbertson and Mesa, Brian Culbertson started doing the hang, where he invited fans into his studio. Literally, he got the technology together so they can literally be virtually in his studio as he's composing and working on music or playing music. And Mesa did Mesa's Kitchen because she loves to cook, and
Mm-hmm.
while she would cook dishes and then she would sing, and they built huge fan bases from those endeavors. Other artists just said, "Woe is me, COVID's here, nothing I can do." And sometimes you got to be a little innovative and think outside the box too.
Yep, and many of them did home concerts too. So
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
streamed them live, and so
yeah,
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So, well, look, we've covered a lot of ground tonight. I think we've shared a lot of ideas with artists who may be out there tuning in tonight. Now, for people who are listening in tonight that aren't artists or musicians, I hope you learned a lot more about the music industry, and I hope you'll go out and support your local artists. They need your support. So,
Absolutely.
so everybody, pick a local artist and start to become a fan and show your support for them. It's really needed today to keep music alive. So Ellis, again, thank you very much.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure, and I hope to have you back again as an artist and a booking agent.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more topics that we could cover. So it's
Yeah, there are,
a date. So
definitely are. So you take care of yourself.
all right, sir. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Well, I hope you found that as interesting as I did. That's Ellis White. Ellis White has his booking agency called Sovibe, Sovibe. You can find it on the internet, and you can take a look at his artist list, and you can also find out where those artists are performing, and you can go out and see them live, or you can buy their music. He has a very talented group of artists. So it's called Sovibe Entertainment, Sovibe. and you can find it on the website, and you can find all the information about it. So I want everybody to come back and join us next week. We have so many special guests coming up. We have Heidi Tan, we have Eddie Levert, we have the music legends are going to perform on a special edition of the Power Hour on a Friday night in late August. We have some phenomenal artists who are going to be coming your way. So be sure to tune in next time. And I hope everybody has a great week. And this is Mel Lbin saying good night.
I'm Mel Lbin. I'm the host and the founder of the Jazz Confusion Power
My name
Hour.
is Dion Parson, and I'm honored to share my passion of music with you, our listening audience, through my cultural heritage.
Things can change for you too. If you want to be brand new, that is absolutely possible.